Okay, so now we can put our back piece on. We just want to mark right alongside our wall here and get this to slide down inside of that groove. Okay, so going down the top of my pan, we're at 19 1/4. So that's what we have to cut this down at. One nice thing about this, it's easy to scribe cut in the field. If you ever used a cement board, that wasn't going to happen like that. So this is going to take a little bit of, just because you're trying to get into here and be tight against here, it's going to be a little bit cumbersome. But let's just go ahead and mark this so that we know whether we got into the actual groove, because it's going to be very difficult to tell when we actually put all that sealant in those grooves. So at least when we got it marked, we can make sure that it's, there we go. So you can see this, you get that whole line, about 3/8 of an inch going into that rabbet joint. So that's a good indicator, same here. You can see that's about 3/8 of an inch going into that rabbet joint. That's what you want to make sure that you ensure that you have. Just fill your joint full of sealant. That's where this sausage tube really helps out, because it really makes it easy to fill it up with plenty of sealant. You know, this is the most important aspect to the shower pan. So it's important to completely fill that. Where the board's meeting the side here, we're going to put a nice big bead against that as well. And we're also going to fill up this joint where it goes into the bench. Okay, so the best way to get this in there is trying to put it at an angle a little bit. And then push down on it. You can see how that's squeezing out of the joint there. And you can see your mark all along there. You can see it all along here. Now I did push this bench out a little bit. The bench top. There we go. So you can see that all oozed out of there. That's what you want to see all the way along there. All right, so now the rule of thumb on this one, on the first row, is you want to be about 12 inches off the floor. And the main priority reason for that is if that framing was recessed below here, you might pull the joint apart. So keep your first row of screws 12 inches off the floor. All right, so we just put our laser just to remind us, with 12 inches off of the first, for the first row of screws and washers. And then the same would go for this, because this is technically going into that joint there. So you really don't want to have anything below 12 inches on that first row. So we'll just put one a little bit out of place here, but okay, so then every 12 inches from here. Okay, then take this excess sealant. Make sure you smooth it out. We'll be addressing that here on our final waterproofing details. Our next screw will actually go in between the two boards. So just every 12 inches, first row 12 inches. And then your framing does have to be 16 inches on center. All right, so where the board meets the board, just put a generous bead all the way along the top of that board. So anything that Hydro-Blok meets another board This is what you want to do so that you can seal it and it ensures a waterproof joint between the two boards. So be generous with it. Make sure it has plenty of sealant. When you see that oozing out of the board, that's what you want to see. So you can see how much that is. Put our next panel in. Push that down into the sealant. You can see how that's pushing out. And we can just pinch the two boards together. I do want to mention, when you put these washers in, you want to sink them down to where you can actually put the putty or the actual sealant over it. So make sure it's recessed and it's actually kind of squeezing that board fully. If the washer is outside of this, it's just going to cause problems with tiling. And the proper way to secure it is just to have it slightly below the surface. You can see that I've got my engraving on this caulking gun. This is from Newborn Caulking Guns. I'm getting caulking on it already, but it's nice to have it engraved. And when you do any type of poly sealants like that, you want to just have a thrust ratio at least 18:1 so that you can have an easy time removing this. I don't know if did I poke that? I did. Okay, so if you tilt this out on a diagonal, make sure it gets that sealant. Okay, so I get a lot of questions about these square plaster guards on these types of shower faucets. You do not need these. These are primarily helpful to gauge their depth of your wall, but also if you had a thin wall application like an acrylic tub surround, this would meet up with the back of the tub. But otherwise, you don't need it. You can take it off and then you can put a seal around this. So we're just gonna cut a 4.5-inch circle directly around the center of this. So let's go get ahead and get our board set in and measured for this. So we'll set this down into the make sure it's into our groove here. And then we'll just puncture it right against the valve here. So it gives us our center mark. Okay, so we'll just do a 4.5-inch hole right to our center mark here. It's a little bit off, but that'll be all right. Could be a little bit tighter on that. All right, so then again, when you get this down into your rabbet joint, mark it so you have some kind of indication.
Oh, you don't like that?
Yeah, it's a little off center, but it's all right. It'll be all right.
I was gonna say stop.
It'll be all right. It's water. It doesn't have to be. This is like the rough framing of tile. The waterproofing. I mean, you want to be accurate, but
well, it has like a sleeve that goes over that.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, no, it totally does.
Yeah.
So you can see that's a good 3/8 inch all the way along there. That's what our reference point is for when we slide this into place. So make sure you fill this entire cavity. That's where it's nice to have framing right up against the pan too, so that you can just fill this entire void. You can actually see a little bit of daylight down below there, but just fill this entire joint and then go all the way up the wall. Because then this will adhere and make a waterproof joint towards the wall. So lean the board a little bit. Make sure that's pushing down and squeezing out that sealant. And that looks pretty good. You can kind of see our line there. It's definitely down inside of that joint. That's really the critical aspect of this. Sit on here. Get a center mark here. All right, so time for the final sealant. So basically you want to go over all the seams that you had, all the screw holes you had, and go about an inch overlap on all of that. So that's basically the rule, is 1 inch overlap. So make sure you put a decent amount down the corners of your shower. So we're going to start with the corners first on the vertical surface and then work our way around. So this is one of the real reasons I love these sealant application systems, because they're just so much easier than any type of membrane system or even liquid waterproofing. You know, we're filming, so it takes us a little bit longer to get some of this done, but I could do this whole shower normally in about 3 hours, and you could flood test it that same day if you wanted to. So there's a lot of reasons why this is such a fast and easier system than a lot of other waterproofing systems. You know, liquid waterproofing is awesome, but it takes up a lot of time. You know, you're basically, you know, you can't usually get onto a liquid waterproofed shower for a day. Technically, I could go ahead and set the shower floor tonight if I was really motivated and wanting to get things done. So you can really move quickly onto tiling with a system like this. And just being at sealant application, it's just like any hole, anything that I messed up, I can just fill it in and smooth it out. It's a nice 1 inch band in the corner. And we're gonna have to go over some of those screws in the corner because those washers kind of protrude out a little bit. But this makes a nice tight joint and allows you to get a nice square corner. So when you're doing tile work, it's not causing any problems. And then on every screw hole, just kind of fill it in. And and make sure that those corner screws are done. So this drywall seam is outside of the shower area. The shower doors are going to be right here. So all the waterproofing is underneath the shower area. So you really don't have to address this. Now I am going to be overhanging tile because our bench top is going to come out. So our tile will come out to right about here. But you don't really have to do anything there. There's no sense in waterproofing something that's outside of the shower, in my opinion. I mean, you can add a bead of sealant down the edge of this if you really wanted to, but honestly, they're really, you know, your shower doors are going to be in here. All the time, you know, and my tile work will be out to here. So there's really no reason to mess with that and cause more build out than you really need. Okay, so that takes care of the walls. And then we'll go ahead and go across our bench here too. So this green can be exposed, but the thin set actually kind of bonds a little bit better to the sealant. So if you just cover that whole seam, that usually makes a little bit of a nicer bond when you set your tile. But you know, the one nice thing about this is, you know, anytime if anybody damages anything, you know, you can puncture the front top of this and not worry about anything going wrong. As long as you don't puncture all the way through the board, you're fine. And if you just want to patch something up, just use a little bit of sealant and you're good to go. I mean, that's one reason that I really like this type of system, is because it's so durable. If it took me like a month to finish this and I had other people working in here and they dropped something on the shower pan, you know, I don't have to worry about, you know, as long as it doesn't puncture all the way through the pan, I'm good. And if I see anything, I could just fill it up with sealant and I'm good with my warranty. So it's a very durable product. This is definitely a lot more robust than any type of sheet membrane and even a liquid waterproofing, because the foam is, you know, waterproof all the way through. All right, let me, I'm gonna do the corners of the shower next.